and every time he takes one of my children. So Quentin has been to Europe, and Rain has been to Europe, and Cedar and Wade and Blaze, they all have been to Europe. Maybe 3, 4, 5, maybe Wade, who's the oldest, he's been like 6 or 7 times he's been to Europe. So every time he goes, my husband comes with different money, and he sells some things that I make over there, because they like Native American crafts, and those are things that I make. And he came back with the money he made inside my craft box. So he would have it set out when he plays, and people would buy some of my crafts and they pay him. But he forgot to get it changed into back to American money. So he came home with all of this money. I said, what am I going to do with that? I can only spend that in Europe. I can't spend that in America. So I hold on to it so I can show kids how the dollars look in Europe. So across the ocean, in different parts of Europe, they all have the same money. So you can go to one country and use this money, and you can go to Italy and use this money, and you can go to Germany and use this money. Before, they all had their own different money, and it kind of got hard. So now they changed to everybody having the same money. So that's what a 20 looks like. And their money's really bright and colorful, isn't it? And it's different sizes. So it almost feels like play money when we're over there. And the $10 and the $5. And they have special buildings on there, just like we do. And they have on one side a special building, on the other side a country or a picture of Europe, I mean, itself. And they have silver, if you can see up here. Some of them have silver, and they're really beautiful. So those are the bills, what the bills look like. And then we still have change, because it's hard to get change, yes. That's what I was wondering, maybe if there's something we can put it in, and we can, like a container, and we can look at it. But before, they had all the euros, or, well, besides the euro, dollar, the paper money, they do have coins too. So like we have a dime, here's their 10 cents. Oh, that's difficult to see. It's like a brownish color. And then their 1 cent is the same color as our 1 cent, but it's really smaller. And they have a 50 cent like we do, that's much bigger. But we also go to Canada, and Canada has their own money too. They have coins that are not just $1, but $2. Yeah, and it's 2 different colors. On the inside is one color, and the outside is another color. Look at how big it is.
Whoa.
So we have some Canadian $2 coins. Yeah. And then we also have Canadian dimes. And, oh, you know, Europe has a 20-cent coin. Like we only have a 10 and a quarter. They have a 20. Yeah, it's really different. Then, before they got money, all of them shared the same money. They each had their own money. So I even have money from France, that when they used to have francs, they call them. So this is and this one is kind of weird. It's 1 1/2. Isn't that different? Like we only have ones. They have 1 1/2 francs. And then another place my husband goes to that doesn't use the euro money is the Czech Republic. And they have their own money. So we even have some money from the Czech Republic. That one's really different. A 10. I don't even know what it's called. Because that one I haven't been to the Czech Republic with him. So that's a 10 coin from the Czech Republic and a 5 coin from the Czech Republic. So those are some of the coins. Some of them are duplicates. Some of them are Canadian quarter. There's a Canadian quarter. A Canadian. Oh, okay. They have a 1 cent euro, a 5 cent euro, a 10, a 20, and a 50. All those different zeros they have. Canada has a 5-cent penny, a 10-cent penny, and a quarter, like us. And then some of them, oh, Czech Republic, here's a 1 cent. So I have a 10, a 5, and a 1 for the Czech Republic. So we have up here Canada, Europe, France, and Czech Republic. Canada, Europe, France. 4 different kinds of money from around the world. Yes?
Maybe we can compare them to my coin, like how different they look.
That's an idea.
And
And the rest of them are duplicates. So it's more quarters and more change. But we can pass those around, hold them, and so things would be good. Yes?
do you have any like Brazilian coins?
No, I haven't been to Brazil. I'd love to go, but I haven't been. But this book is a little bit longer, so I wanted to start reading it. And Jacob, when he surprised me, when we were at the table, and I said, oh, that's a different kind. He said, that's a Sacagawea. He knew right away what it was. And then I said, Sacagawea was a Native American woman. And that helped 2 men get across the country. And he said, Lewis and Clark. And I said, how did you know that? And he said, and Sacagawea was traded for horses. I said, how did you know? He knew so much about her, I wanted to show him, there's a book that I have that's about her. So he said, can I be the page turner? And I said, because you know so much about her, I'll let you turn the page. So this is called Sacagawea, and it's written by Lise Erdrich, and she is an Ojibwe Native American woman who writes books about Native people. There's a picture of her holding her, what?
Son, baby.
Baby, yeah, it is a son, you're right. I wonder if she has a son, huh? Can we find out? Sacagawea. In a Rocky Mountain Valley where 3 rivers flowed into one near the year 1800, a group of Shoshone Indians had set up camp. They came down out of the mountains only once a year in search of buffalo. The women were drying meat over the fire, and the men were gone hunting. A young girl about 11 or 12 years old. We know some kids who are 11 and 12, that's young. They were busy helping to prepare for the winter. She gathered roots and berries and firewood at the riverbank. They had to work quickly. There were enemies in the territory. Suddenly, the teepee camp exploded in noise and confusion. The enemy was attacking. The girl ran into the river trying to escape. Hidatsa warriors grabbed her and sped away on horseback. Other Shoshone were captured or killed. Their beautiful horses were stolen. 3 warriors and their captives traveled east. Who do you think they took captive? Sacagawea. They caught her. Mountains and forests faded in the distance behind them as they crossed the Great Plains. The young Shoshone girl was overwhelmed by the vast open space as she was taken farther and farther from everything she knew. She stared in astonishment when at last one morning they reached the earth-large villages of the Hidatsa and the Mandan people. Women were paddling down a river in bowl-shaped boats on the way to their gardens. The boat is like a bowl. Smoke rose from large upside-down bowls and crowded on the high river bank. These bowls had doors with people coming out, so many. There were 5,000 people in the Indian villages where the Knife River entered the Missouri. The young girl joined a Hidatsa household. She was given the name Sacagawea, which means bird woman. The Hidatsa women taught her how to tend their gardens, and she marveled at the sunflowers she had never seen. Her Shoshone people didn't grow gardens. They were wanderers who gathered their food in the wild. Sacagawea learned to sing to the corn to help it grow and chased away hungry birds. She carried home the harvest in a round bowl boat and a boat made from buffalo hide with the tail left on it for a handle. Whoa, that's incredible. Sacagawea had been with the Hidatsa family almost 4 years already. She was given in marriage to Toussaint Charbonneau, a French fur trader. Sacagawea was no more than 16. Charbonnet was much older.
Oops.
While Sacagawea was learning the ways of their people, President Thomas Jefferson, is he on one of the phones? President Thomas Jefferson was making plans for an expedition. It would be known as the Corps of Discovery. An expedition is one of the people of the United States knew almost nothing about the land between the Mississippi River and the Pacific Ocean, and the Native Americans who lived there did not know that the United States had bought a large part of the land. They didn't believe that the earth could be bought or sold. The expedition would be led by Captain Meriwether Lewis and Captain Clark. It would begin near St. Louis on May 14th, 1804. That's a long time ago. A crew of more than 40 men went into boats called pirogues. The Corps of Discovery was on their way. The expedition arrived at Sacagawea's camp at the end of October. Sacagawea heard tales of a giant black dog that traveled with them. She heard that a man with black skin was among the crew. This was York, their helper. The explorers built a fort and called it Fort Mandan. They settled in for the winter. The people of the villages told them they could get horses from the Shoshone when they reached the mountains. Charbonneau proposed that he guide them and his wife Sacagawea be an interpreter so she could talk to the other Indian people that they would meet. This was exciting news, but Sacagawea's mind was on another matter. Soon she was going to have a baby. In February, it came time for her to have the baby, and Captain Lewis wanted to help. They made rattles out of rattlesnakes and mixed water, rattlesnake rattles and mixed water with it. Just a few minutes after drinking the mixture, she gave birth to a baby boy. His name was Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau. But Captain Clark made him a nickname called Pumpy. On April 7th, 1804, the Corps of Discovery started west, going upstream on a muddy Missouri River in 2 pirogues and 2 canoes. Pompey wasn't even 2 months old. And Sacagawea walked along the riverbank. She carried him on her back in a cradle board, wrapped up snug in her shawl. Every member of the Corps was hired for a special skill. Sacagawea did what she could to help with the expedition. She was paid nothing. As she walked along the shore, she looked for plants to keep the crew healthy. She gathered berries. She dug wild artichoke roots with a digging stick. She learned all of these things in her Shoshone childhood. The Corps of Discovery was traveling less than 2 months when a disaster nearly struck. Charbonneau was steering a boat through choppy waters when a sudden high wind tipped the boat sideways. He lost his wits and he dropped the rudder while the boat filled with water. The valuables were spilling overboard. Charbonneau was ordered to get the boat back in order and get all the supplies. Sacagawea stayed calm and she jumped in the river and rescued all of their supplies. She rescued journals, gunpowder, medicines, scientific instruments, every bundle that she could reach. Without these supplies, they would not have been able to continue. A few days later, they came to a beautiful river, and the captain named it after her, Sacagawea River. By June, they were entering a mountain country. Soon they could hear a great roar in the distance, a waterfall, the Great Falls of Missouri. There was no way to get past, and so it took the Corps nearly a month to get around the Great Falls and the 4 waterfalls that they found behind it. So as they kept going, things would get in the way, and they would have to figure out how to get around it. Sounds like a hard journey, doesn't it? Yeah, a lot of things happening. They built wagons to carry the boats and the supplies across the mountains. One day, a freak cloudburst caused a flash flood. Rocks, mud, and water came crashing down into the canyon. Sacagawea held on to her and her son as tight as she could, while Clark pushed and pulled them both to safety. She was holding a baby and they almost got swept away by the mud and the rocks. Tom's cradleboard, his clothes, and his bedding were all swept away, but they were unharmed and safe. Middle of July, they were once again paddling up the river. They reached the valley where 3 rivers came together. Sacagawea knew this place well. She was not upset to see it. The captains learned that this is where she had been captured, and she was 12 years old. She recognized a landmark that her people called Beaverhead Mountain. She knew they must be nearing the Shoshone camp. See, if they didn't have her with them, they would have no idea where they were. But she recognized all of these places and helped them get there. 2 weeks later, they walked along the river and she saw a familiar territory. Suddenly, he saw her dancing up and down with happiness. This meant that she saw her people, the Shoshone, in the distance. An excited crowd greeted the explorers at the Shoshone land. And although years had passed since she was captured, a woman recognized her, and she rushed up to Sacagawea and threw her arms around her. Lewis and Clark discovered they needed horses to get across the mountains. A grand council was to be called to discuss the matter, and Sacagawea would come to translate so they could understand what the Shoshone people were saying. Interpreting for the men at the council was a serious job. She wanted to do her best, but when she looked at the face of the Shoshone chief across from her, she burst into tears. He was her brother, Kamehameha. Sacagawea jumped up, threw her blanket over her brother, and wept, because they didn't see each other in a long time, and she recognized him after they grew up. Kamehameha was moved too, but they had serious business to do, and so they kept to their duty and did their counsel. Sacagawea spent the last days of August with her people, and the time passed through quickly. Before long, they had to mount the Shoshone horses and continue west across the mountains, leaving the boats behind. The next part of the journey almost killed them. The mountain paths were narrow and dangerous, especially once it started to snow. Their feet froze, they didn't have enough to eat, and the mountains seemed endless. Finally, the expedition emerged on the Pacific side of the Rockies. There, the Nez Perce Indians helped them make new boats and agreed to keep their horses in case they returned. With a great relief, the crew left their boats into the Clearwater River and let the current carry them toward the ocean. At the beginning of November, they noticed a sound that could only be the crashing of waves. They had finally reached the Pacific Ocean. The crew voted on where to spend the winter. Sacagawea was allowed to vote with her. She wanted to stay where she could find plenty of wapato roots for winter food. They set up camp not far from the ocean in case a ship came to take them back home. But by now, the people back east were sure that they were not alive anymore because they were gone so long. They thought they couldn't have lived. No ship came for them. A cold rain soaked the crew as they cut logs to build a fort. Fort Clatsop. The hunters were to find game while Sacagawea dug for roots in the soggy ground. Christmas Day was rainy and dreary, but they were determined to celebrate. They fired a salute with their guns and sang, and Sacagawea gave Captain Clark a fine gift of 24 white weasel tails. Little baby's getting bigger, huh? In early January, Clark heard from Indians that a whale had washed up on shore. He decided to go to the ocean to get blubber for the crew to eat. They were tired of their diet of lean, spoiled meat and fish. Sacagawea gathered up her courage and insisted that she be allowed to go with them. She hadn't traveled so far to leave without ever seeing the ocean, and she wanted to see that monstrous creature. The captain agreed to let her go. She lived in the mountains. Do they have whales in the mountains? She wanted to see this big animal. At last, she saw the Pacific Ocean. She stood and stared at the great waters stretching endlessly in front of her. On the beach was the great skeleton of the great whale. It was an amazing sight, nearly as long as 20 men lying down end to end. The whale had been picked clean, but Clark was able to buy some blubber from the Indians to feed his people. The crew stayed busy all winter, hunting, sewing moccasins, making repairs on their equipment, and making maps, working on a report to President Jefferson. Sacagawea watched over Pomp as he began to walk. Clark called him my little dancing boy. He had become very attached to Sacagawea's son. When the time came, it would be hard for him to part. Spring arrived and it was time to go back. In late March, they headed up the Columbus River to get their horses from the Nez Perce. Sacagawea would help guide Clark's group south on the Yellowstone River, while Lewis's group would head northeast to explore Marias River. So the group was going to split in two and try to go two separate ways. At the end of July, Clark's group came across a rock tower on the banks of the Yellowstone. He named it after the little boy, Pompey's Tower, in honor of his beloved little friend. Inside of the rock, he carved William Clark, July 25th, 1806. You can go there and you can see Pompey's Tower on a map. And you can go to where the tower is and you can see that still on the rock.
Wait, this is the true story.
Yes. That's why they made a point about it. The two groups came back together in August. 2 days later, Sacagawea gazed once again on the round lodges of the Knife River village. She had been gone a year and 4 months. Lewis and Clark prepared to return to St. Louis. Before they left, Captain Clark talked to Sacagawea and her husband. He offered to take Pomp back with him to St. Louis. He would see that the boy had a good education and he would raise him as his own. He loved the baby so much he wanted to raise him. Sacagawea knew that Captain Clark would take good care of her son, but he wasn't even 2 years old yet, and she couldn't let him go yet. Sacagawea promised they would bring Pomp to visit Clark in a year or so. On August 17, 1806, Sacagawea watched as the Corps of Discovery set off again down the Missouri River. Her journey of exploration was over, but the Corps of Discovery still had hundreds of miles to go. And then the afterwards tells just a little bit. It's called an afterwards, after the story is done. This is where the story ended. And after the story is done, they just wanted to tell you a little bit about what happened afterwards. And when the boy got older, it says that 5 years old, she took him to Lewis, to Captain Lewis, and let him raise him to that he could go to school and he could get an education. And it says that she had another little baby named Louisa. But it also said that she died very young from sickness. So she didn't live to get to be very old. Not too long after this, she got a sickness that she couldn't get over.
And she had a long time to spend time with the other kids and take care of them.
Yes.
What did she do with her other kid when she was sick?
Well, the girl still had her daddy. the husband,
Which was her second
girl. But can you imagine a year and 4 months traveling across rivers, through mountains, in snow, in rain, carrying a baby, jumping into the river and saving all the supplies, finding food that they could survive? She did a lot, didn't she? They said if she didn't go with them, they wouldn't have made it. The men would have starved, they wouldn't have been able to find the food they needed, the medicine they needed. All their supplies would have got washed away down the river if she didn't jump in. If she wasn't there, they might not have either. So they did something special, and they made a coin, right? The dollar coin, the one that looks a little different, I think is it gold?
Yeah, it's gold and it has her face on it.
Yeah, and that's why they made a coin.
And it has the her son on it.
So that's the baby she carried. I didn't even see this, but Jacob also said, look, there's Lewis and Clark.
Really?
It looks like it's abstract. It's not like a real picture, but it's something that's supposed to represent them in the background.
They don't see one.
Do you have any other questions? We can keep this in the classroom and put it in a special place where when you have time, you can look at it, pictures closely, and cover it.
I do that.